Have you ever been really, really thirsty? You drank and you just couldn't get your thirst quenched. I can remember when I was in high school playing football. Before school started, we would have those late July and early August practices. We'd have before you went to camp, I guess, or after, I can't remember. We'd have those 2 days. You'd have morning practice, and by the time you got out of that practice, I mean, it was hot out here. And that is in August. And you get so thirsty. And then we go home for a while and then come back that afternoon. But I can remember some of my buddies, you got to understand, this is 40 years ago. You're that old, trust me, I'm that old. 40 years ago, we would leave that morning practice, and you were from Dalton, in this area. You'll remember there was an A&W root beer on Morris Street. And it was, when you went in, you sat down, you ordered, and they had great hamburgers. I can still remember the Big Deal, is what it was called. And you have a cheeseburger and fries, and you would order a root beer in a frosted mug. And they'd bring that frosted mug out there, and you could drink it just like that. And then you could drink another one just like that, because the bodies were so parched. But now, later on, I understand that carbonated beverages like those, anything with caffeine in it actually does not hydrate you. It actually does the opposite. It dehydrates you. And you can drink a lot of it in a hurry and you're still thirsty. Your body needs that natural water, because our bodies are made up of a large portion of water. And same is true with alcohol, by the way. You want more of it, but it doesn't satisfy. And that's the way it was in those days. I can remember drinking those frosted mugs. Oh, it was so good. But it didn't satisfy. It needed water. In fact, where's the water? Don't you love drinking good cold water? This has been in the refrigerator, so it's good and cold. Excuse me. That's good. Anybody thirsty yet? You know why? Because those advertisements at the movies, don't you? They want you to go buy a Coke. And another. They want you to get the big gulp size, the largest one. Jesus made a point to seek out a woman that was from the other side of the tracks, we might say, that he knew was really thirsty. Now, she'd been drinking, but the thirst wasn't getting satisfied. And that's the way maybe you are here today. You're drinking from things of this world, but it's not satisfying you. You just keep going back to it. And your soul is seeking something that's truly satisfying. Well, that's the way she was. And our story today comes from John chapter 4. Familiar story to a lot of them. A lot of you. And I want to pick up today and read verses 3 through 18, I think, of the story. That's why I put it over here. Let's read it together. This is from the English Standard Version. Pretty close to your traditional King James and New King James. Jesus left Judea and departed again for Galilee. Let me stop. I'm sorry. It's going to take a long time. If I I'll stop after every sentence. But Judea was the southern portion of Israel where Jesus lived. In the middle was Samaria. And on the upper end, the northern portion was Galilee. And we know that Jesus spent a lot of time in Galilee as well as in Judea. And it goes on to say, and he had to pass through Samaria. Well, for us today, that just stands to reason. That's the shortest route. But for Jews in that day, you see, they were sort of, I use the word, against Samaritans. It was the bad part of the country. And so they would take a 6-day route around Samaria so they wouldn't have to go through it, rather than going a 2-day route straight through. And it says that he had to pass through Samaria. That word "had" kind of stuck out in my mind. Why did he have to do it? Well, because he wasn't interested in going around people. He wanted to go to people. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. And of course, this is Old Testament history. And Jacob's well was there. So Jesus was wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well, and it was about the 6th hour. That was about noon. So he arrives there, he's sitting there at about the 6th hour, and let me go ahead and tell you, it says this later in the text, but Jesus had sent his disciples into Sychar to buy food for the midday lunch, for midday meal. Because you know how hard it is to take food with you on a trip. And so they were buying food in Sychar. He was sitting there by this well, and verse 7 says, a woman from Samaria came to draw water. And she said, and Jesus said to her, give me a drink. And the Samaritan woman said to him, how is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? Now, all those words are important. Jew, woman, and Samaria. Those are all very important words because the Jews had no dealings with the Samaritans. They considered them a lower class of people. In fact, they were what they would call half-breeds. They were part Jewish. And so they had a lot of disdain for them, a lot of bitterness towards them. And so it was kind of a traditional thing that carried on for generations. And then the second part is that she was a woman. And I'll address that later. And so Jews didn't have any dealings with Samaritans. And he's sitting there and he asked a Samaritan woman. And it tells that in the next verse. The Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Verse 10, Jesus answered her and he said, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that's saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Let's keep going. Verse 13. Skip a couple of verses. Jesus said to her, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, referring to the well. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water, welling up to eternal life. In other words, you're going to have something that satisfies you not just today or not just for a few hours, but it's going to satisfy you your whole life. Would the church say amen? Amen. Amen. I mean, he satisfies you. And the woman said to him, sir, give me this water. She didn't quite understand what he's talking about. So that I will not be thirsty and have to come here to draw water. And Jesus said to her, go call your husband and come here. And the woman answered him and said, I have no husband. And Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying this. I have no husband. For you have had 5 husbands, and the one that you now have is not your husband. What you have said is true." And so Jesus reveals to her not only her true need, but about her life and the things that she's been searching for that cannot satisfy her. And so, in this story, Jesus invites all of us to depart from our plans, depart from our prejudices, depart from our schedules, so that we can talk to people who are thirsty for Him and don't know Him. They're thirsty for Him, but they're not, because they're just drinking of the water of this world. And so I'm going to give you several points here, and I'll try to do it as quickly as possible. The first thing, and this sort of builds on what we've already talked about the last couple of weeks. Jesus saw people as more important than anything else. Remember we talked about the lost sheep and how that one was more important than the 99 because it was the one that was lost. And we talked briefly last week about the coin. The one was more important than the 9 that the woman had. And when she found it, she rejoiced. And then we talked about the prodigal son and how the one was more important than the 2, the second. Because one was lost and one was with him. And so Jesus saw people as more important than anything else. And we see here that when He went through Samaria, it wasn't His agenda that was most important. It wasn't His schedule. It wasn't His opinion of Samaritans or of their customs. But as He was tired, that didn't overcome Him from talking to her, the Samaritan woman. You know, we kind of say, "Oh, I don't feel like it today." Or we're in a bad mood. It wasn't His weariness or His mood. The most important thing with Jesus was talking, verbal conversation with this lost woman, this thirsty woman. And I think Jesus is trying to get us to understand that as believers, the most important thing we can do in life, yes, we want to be good parents, we want to raise our children, we want to teach God's values, we want to understand God's Word, we want to attend church, we want to give offerings, we want to do all the things that we do. But the most important thing of all that we do is to put people first. You can just say it in 2 simple words. People matter. People matter. And we sit here in the church house and we nod our heads and we say amen and we agree with that. But when we walk out the door, it's like we forget all about that, and it's all about our agenda. It's all about our schedule. It's all about our pace of life. But you know what? People still matter. There are lost people, people who do not know Jesus, who are thirsty for something to truly satisfy. They're all around us, every day. And the thing about Jesus is He saw people as individuals. See, He didn't see her as a group or a class, as a woman that you couldn't talk to because you were a Jewish man, or as a Samaritan. By the way, she's at the well at noon because she was basically an immoral woman. And the men liked her more than the women did. So she couldn't come in the morning when the women came because she felt so condemned. And so she would come at noon in the hot part of the day So she wouldn't have to deal with those moral women who disdained her. But see, Jesus didn't encounter her and see her based on her immorality, based on her gender, based on her background, based on her heritage, based on her ethnic group. He didn't encounter her based on those things. The only thing that mattered is she was a thirsty woman who needed eternal life. Something that would truly satisfy her. Remember, Jesus said that He came to seek and to save the lost. And God, over the last few weeks, has really been driving that into my heart. And I've been sharing that with you, and I hope it's finding a lodging place. And I hope that the more that we hear it, the more that we begin to really pray for the lost and pray for those witnessing opportunities. And when I say the lost, I mean those who are eternally thirsty, but I also mean those who are away from God. And we can't judge people by their church attendance a lot of times. But their attitudes and actions will reveal they are God. And so whoever we're talking about people who need the Lord. It wasn't religious rules. Did you know that in that day and time there was a law among men of that day that said you couldn't speak publicly to a woman, including your wife. You didn't talk to her publicly. Much less a woman of Samaria, much less an immoral woman of Samaria. See, the Jews had added so many religious laws to the actual law of God, which Jesus summed up: love God, love others. That it's like if they did the right things, then they were okay. And so it wasn't religion or anything else that controlled him. And so let me move on. Love must be our motivation for seeking those who don't know the true need. Love has got to be our motivation. Why did God send His Son? Tell me. What's John 3:16 says? He loved. Why did Jesus go to the cross? Because He loved. He loved us. Why did Jesus spend time with immoral people? Why did Jesus spend time with sinners and tax collectors? Because He loved people. And yet we like our own kind of people, don't we? Go ahead, it's okay. Nod your head yes. We do, don't we? Am I the only one? I don't see any heads nodding. Maybe I'm the only one in the bunch. But I just don't believe that. I think we like our own kind of people. And we don't go across the tracks to spend time with somebody who's not like us. But when we try to talk to someone, whether it's a church invitation or actually just sharing who Jesus is and what He means to us, they're not a number. They're not a goal. They're not somebody that you can put on your crown. Love's got to be our motivation. We've got to see them as people who are eternally thirsty. People who are drinking from the root beer when what they need is water. And if we follow Jesus' examples, we'll share out of the heart of love that breaks for those who are away from God, for those who fail to seek Him. And guilt or duty is not sufficient for us to really do that. It takes love. So now, some people in here today, over the last couple of weeks, you're thinking about what I'm saying, and you're thinking, I've got to start sharing. But you're doing it because you feel guilty, or because you think it's your duty. Can I tell you that something? If you do it out of guilt or duty, you're probably going to go to the wrong people. Because you're going to miss the ones that Jesus wants you to see. Ask Him each morning, God, give me somebody who's thirsty today. Because they can't get satisfied. You see, Jesus sees us all. Red, yellow, black, or white. They are precious in His sight. As priceless treasure that's been lost and that He loves and desires to get back. Just like the lost sheep and just like the lost coin and just like the lost boy. And we all bear scars of our sinful choices. But somehow we forget about ours when we're looking at other people's. Oh, it's quiet in here, isn't it? Because I didn't mean for it to be this hard. I'm just preaching. This is what we find in the text. We all bear scars of sinful choices and brokenness. And if He loves us, why couldn't He love them? I remind you, Romans says that in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And one literal translation says, when we were as bad as we could be, Jesus died for us. And it should be love for Him and love for others that drive us, not guilt or duty or anything else. We've got to look beyond people's attitudes. See, some people got attitudes. You don't like their attitudes. I don't like their attitudes. Can I tell you? There are some people I do not like their attitudes. And I don't like their actions. Just ask my wife, because she knows sometimes I chime off at home. I'm not always like this. But in spite of their attitudes and their actions and their appearance, God wants me to see them as people that matter. They matter. Oh, they matter. Eternity will bear it out. And our hearts have got to break for those people. So verse 6 tells us that when Jesus arrived at noon, they were going to purchase food, and He encounters this thirsty woman. Now, can't you imagine, I don't know if we can imagine, how surprised she was. One, to find Him sitting there at that well, a Jewish man. Two, that she would speak to Him. And three, that she would say, give me a drink. Because Jews would have nothing to do with anything that Samaritans ate or drank. Do you realize that for him to get a drink is back like it used to be when everybody had wells? You had a ladle. And you dip into the bucket. And everybody drank from the same ladle. And He's going to put Samaritans, something that's been on Samaritan's lips, to His lips. She was shocked. She was flabbergasted. And she really almost gives a sarcastic answer. You, being a Jew, you ask me for something to drink? That Jesus would speak to her. It was kind of like she was saying, what's a nice guy like you doing here with a not so nice woman like me? And and asking for a drink to boot. She'd never encountered such. You know what such is? That's a good southern word. She'd never encountered such love, such treatment from a Jewish person. But Jesus not only spoke to her, he asked for a drink. And so let me move on. Love must be our motivation. But whatever number I'm on, don't let barriers keep us from those who are thirsty. Don't let a barrier keep you from those who need Jesus. You see, Jesus broke through cultural barriers. He broke through an economic barrier. Sometimes we have a problem with that. He broke through lifestyle or habit barriers. She was immoral. She'd been married 5 times and was living with a man that wasn't her husband then. And yet he still wanted to talk to her. He broke through racial barriers. He broke through the barrier of crime. Because I know, particularly as I discussed this with Tammy, that sometimes, especially women, are hesitant to talk to a man. But Jesus broke through that. And I understand, you got to be safe, ladies. He broke through religious barriers. Because she started talking about, well, worship here on this mountain, and the Jews worship here, and you know, all this stuff. And as I was thinking about this, I thought, you know, sometimes when people say they're from, let me just throw out something, Jehovah's Witness, or they're Catholic. There's probably got somebody here that was raised Catholic. I think we do. But when we encounter people like that with the open, can't talk about that. But Jesus, he didn't let that deter him. He stayed on the main subject, talking about something that satisfies. Denominations. Oh, we don't talk to those Pentecostals. They're crazy. They're wild. They go to the Church of God. Oh, no, that's not for me. Those Presbyterians, oh, no, they're too straight for me. Episcopalians, they drink. Oh, you talk to them. Do you know what I'm talking about? You know, we just sort of don't break through those. Plus, let alone moral barriers. But Jesus broke. He just charged headlong into it. But he did it in love. And that wasn't the issue. The issue was she was thirsty and she needed something that would satisfy her eternally. He didn't think of this woman by this classification or this group of people. He thought of her as a woman. He didn't know her true name. And he knew what she really needed. And we all, today, if we're going to be obedient to Christ's call in our lives, our salvation, we've got to be barrier breakers. We can't let barriers stand between us and encountering someone. Ask yourself, what barriers have I allowed to form between me and people who are away from the Lord? I need to repeat that. What barriers have I allowed? Do I treat people of certain ethnic background differently? Do I think or act less Christ-like around people who vote differently than I do? Do I withhold loving ministry from people who disobey God when it comes to sexual preference or sexual behavior? Yeah, man. Have I allowed my schedule to become so busy that it forms a barrier between myself and people who are lonely, hurting, who live next door or work next to us? Is there any kind of person that you look at and see as anything but a lost human being that Jesus died for? That's the only way we can see Him. We're obedient to being like Jesus. And if we want to lead people to Him, we can't isolate ourselves from Him. Yes, I know as Christians, we are to be separate from our culture. We are not to be partakers of sinful practices. But we're not to isolate ourselves from the people of our culture. And we need to realize that separating ourselves from those people who do not know Him is disobedience to God. It's disobedient to His commands. And we need to follow Jesus and break down those barriers. Let me move on. I think I got this one more. A person's sinful action usually reflects their spiritual needs. Sin reflects spiritual need. Not so we can judge them. But Jesus knew this woman was thirsty for more than water. Not only did she have an empty water pot, she had an empty life. By this point, she's been married 5 times. And by the time she got to number 6, she probably thought, well, what's the use? And I'm work anyway. She was thirsty for a relationship that really mattered. And that's what Jesus offered. Because friend, when you drink from the water of Jesus, you find a relationship. It's not a religion. It's not a do-good thing. It is a relationship with someone who loves us eternally and gives and blesses and gives and blesses and gives and blesses and gives and blesses. It's a relationship. Jesus said, whoever drinks from this water will get thirsty again. He that drinks from the water I give will never thirst. King Solomon, man, I'm thirsty. Still refreshing. Still good. King Solomon was a guy who kept going back, trying to find refreshment in the things of this world. He tried wealth. He tried relationships. He didn't have 5 plus 1. He had 700 plus 300, roughly speaking. Basically, all us men think he was a lunatic. It's hard enough to die for yourself to please one woman. And by the way, if you're a woman, it's hard enough to die for yourself to please one man. But he tried the well of wealth. He tried the well of pleasure. He tried the well of women. But it kept leaving him thirsty. You know, when you read the book of Ecclesiastes, you find out at the end of his life, he said, stuff doesn't satisfy. He said, I found a simple answer. And I want you to know, when you keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, and I'm probably talking to somebody right here today, it's like a drug or a drink. You just keep trying it over and over, hoping somehow it will take. But it will always leave you thirsty again. Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13. I don't think I put this on the overhead. It's a great verse. Yeah, there it is. That God said about His people in the Old Testament, when they had gotten far away from Him. Listen to what He said. He said, for my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living water, and hewed out for themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. Through their own efforts and their own pursuits, he said they're trying to drink from wells that hold no water. And I love that last little statement right there in white. Dehydrated hearts send desperate messages. Think about that. Think about people you know. They're sending desperate messages because their hearts are dehydrated. They're drinking things like caffeinated drinks and alcohol, the metaphor. But it's not satisfying. They're trying everything in the world, but they're not satisfied. They're dehydrated spiritually. See, we have a soul that's born to thirst to know God. He gave us that. And this longing manifests itself in our behavior. Jesus saw this woman's action as an indication of her spiritual need. Her lifestyle choices reveal her real thirst for God. You make one mistake here. As you encounter people, you're trying to talk to them, they're going to raise some objections. They're going to start talking about questions that people have been talking about hundreds and thousands of years. That's exactly what this woman did. In verse 19, the woman said to him, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where we are to worship. They had been arguing about that for hundreds of years. Hundreds and hundreds of years. You know, sometimes people bring up questions. They'll ask you about hell, or they'll tell you about a parent or a grandparent who was a preacher, or they'll tell you that, you know, all religions seem the same, which one's really right. They'll start talking about all these things. And although you have to be kind and gracious, but if you're careful, you can keep this conversation on the main thing. And it's their need. And so that's what Jesus did. Because when she brought up later, she said, we know, as Samaritans, we know that Messiah is going to come. And And in verse 26, Jesus said, I am he who speaks to you. I've offered you living water. It's your choice to take it. You brought up the Messiah. I'm he. You can choose me or choose not. I've told you everything about your life and what's not satisfying you. And so ultimately people have a choice. She attempted to avoid the decision. She tried to divert Jesus from the matter at hand, which was her need. She was like fish on the line, trying to wiggle off the hook. You ever lost one off the hook? And it's always a big one, right? Oh man, that would have been a good one. Jesus knew it was time for her to make a decision. The only way she could choose and how something that satisfied her, she had to take the living water.